I want to do the intro like, who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters! But every time I go to do it, I can't help but think of this clip.
Who you gonna call? The Griffins.
Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. The Spengler family team up with the original Ghostbusters in New York City at the famous firehouse when they discover an ancient artifact which unleashes an evil force, causing the Ghostbusters team to protect their home and save the world from a second ice age. And no, we're not talking about the animated films. I didn't really grow up with the Ghostbusters, so I can't say like I'm a full-fledged fan, but I did enjoy the first Ghostbusters film, and I did also enjoy Ghostbusters Afterlife, so I had a little bit of anticipation with this film. Ultimately, I've had a pretty good time, like it's a good, entertaining Ghostbusters film. It's not as bad as Ghostbusters 2, but it's definitely nowhere in the same ballpark as the original film. It doesn't quite have that same magic, but it's still an entertaining, fun, thrilling film. It has a lot of laughs that don't work and some that do. There's some funny parts to this film, and then parts where I was like, oh, what a misfire.
This girl is on fire!
There are some great performers and actors in this movie, of course, like Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon, Grace McKenna, Finn Wolfhard, Ernie Hudson, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and the list goes on and on. There are great roles in this film, and this movie feels like a legit Ghostbusters movie. We're back in New York City, baby, which is the perfect setting for a Ghostbusters film, and I'm so glad that they're back in the Big Apple instead of being in like a small kind of tiny Oklahoma town like they were in Ghostbusters Afterlife. This felt like maybe one of the scarier of the Ghostbusters movies, even though I don't think, for me personally, the Ghostbusters movies are quote-unquote a scary movie. But this had the most horror elements, maybe out of all the other Ghostbuster films, which I thought was interesting and a lot of fun, and a creative way to bring in a cool villain that has these ice, powers, like Frozen. Let it go! But a cool twist on the end of the world apocalypse story, which, it feels like every Ghostbuster film is about that, and it does feel a little bit recycled at times, and that's where this franchise feels like it's running a little bit out of steam.
I walk into the steam room, and it's really steamy.
But they prop up this film enough to make it entertaining, to make it a lot of fun, and to have a good time. Like, I felt this is a good film that families can enjoy, anyone from the age like 10 and over will have a good time with this movie. Even if you're not a big Ghostbusters fan, and if you are, you'll find a lot of love enjoying this film, a lot of callbacks, a lot of like cameos. If you're not a Ghostbusters fan per se, like how I am, I think there's still a lot of enjoyment to be had here. There are some great one-liners. There's some funny parts with like Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon. And I really like the focus of like Grace McKenna's character in this film is such a central part, alongside with bringing back the original Ghostbusters of like Ernie Hudson and Bill Murray. And, Bill Murray's only in it for a few minutes, but Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd and their characters are throughout the entirety of this film. They're not just cameos like they were in Afterlife, and I love that. I love the combination of the old Ghostbusters and the new ones, and how they just create a really cool team. And I love that Dan Aykroyd's character of Ray gets placed with Grace McKenna's character, Phoebe, so much in this film, and they play actually very well off each other, and I can't help just to have a good time when they were on screen. I thought that actually the humor in Afterlife was a bit better executed, maybe just because that's Jason Reitman behind the camera. The tone of this movie is a lot of fun, but that's what the word keeps coming back to, is just fun.
When you gonna have some fun?
I don't think this is an exceptionally well-made movie. I don't think it's that well executed. The acting is good enough, and the directing and writing is good enough, and the film crosses the finish line, but definitely not going to be standing on the podium anywhere.
If you ain't first, you're last.
The story is a bit messy and convoluted at times. There are way too many subplots in this film where, like, Finn Wolfhard is chasing a ghost, getting slimed on, and they recycled that sort of joke over and over again. and it's just a thankless role for him in this. Same thing with the character of Podcast. They don't really give them too much, and they sort of sideline Finn Wolfhard's like girlfriend from, or girl love interest from the first film, and they're kind of in this movie, but not really. And it just leaves a bunch of other subplots that are less to be desired.
Who spanked you?
I think if they trimmed some of those in the first place and didn't even have them in the film, the pacing of this movie would just work a lot better. Where there was probably about 20 minutes left of this film and I was going like, I feel like this should have ended already. It felt longer. Afterlife has a lot better of a pace and a tone to it. There are so many characters in this film. It was a little bit baffling at times, like, who are all these people?
Who are you?
What is happening? Like, this person has this plot line and this person needs to be doing this person's that. Whoa. But like they all kind of mesh together at the end, sort of, but not really. No, there's too many characters in this film. Makes this film seem messy and kind of strewn together with a loose stitch. And the other thing is that this movie definitely had a lack of emotionality in the film, or an emotional drive. In Ghostbusters Afterlife, it is definitely centered around Egon and his family, and so there is an emotional connection to a character that we have loved for decades now. In this movie, they didn't really have a strong emotional tie-in anywhere. The rest of it just felt almost like they were just running through the mill of another Ghostbusters film in the franchise, which is fine. I'm not complaining about that, but there's no emotional punch, right? There's nothing in the story that ultimately connects me and grounds me to this film besides it just being another fun Ghostbusters film. This was still a fun ride. It is probably my third favorite Ghostbusters film out of all the entire franchise. Before I give my final thoughts and grade on this film, please make sure you click that like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to my channel down below. Also, while you're down there, make sure you comment. What did you think of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire? Were you a lover, a fan of this film? Are you a fan of this franchise? Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
I am glad to be back playing in this sandbox of the Ghostbusters world. So I was happy ultimately with this film. The Ghostbusters, they delivered on their call this time around. So I'm gonna go ahead and give Ghostbusters Frozen Empire a B. Thank you so much for checking out Mr. Teach Film Preach. If you enjoyed this, come back and check out some other content such as my review for Love Lies Bleeding, Kung Fu Panda 4, and Dune Part 2. Have a great day, everyone. Stay focused, stay awesome, and as always, let's get taught.